The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the neatly lined streets of Maplewood. Everything in this suburban paradise seemed serene, but just off the center of the scene stood a woman whose fire sparked an unexpected storm. Evelyn Harper, a middle-aged resident who had always blended into the background of neighborhood gatherings, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Evelyn had grown tired of the mundane life dictated by the routine of work, coffee, and endless chores. No one had ever seen her as anything more than a quiet, unassuming member of the community. But today was different. Standing firmly next to her gray Jeep, abandoned since last night, she felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The brightly colored sign she had hurriedly made, reading, "You towed the wrong Jeep," flapped vigorously in the light breeze, matching her rebellious spirit. The group of police officers loitering nearby were an unexpected audience and an even more unexpected symbol of chaos. Evelyn had never envisioned herself before anyone in authority, yet here she was, pointing an accusatory finger at the line of uniformed figures. Her heart raced. How had she come to this point? In her mind, it began with a simple trip to the grocery store. As she returned home yesterday evening, her thoughts were clouded by what groceries to buy for dinner, obliviously parked her Jeep right in front of her friend Carol's house. A friendly wave and a short catch-up chat with Carol diverted her attention away for just moments. When she'd entered her home, she'd assumed all was well. It wasn't until the next morning that Evelyn found out her Jeep had been towed. Now, anger simmered beneath the surface. She had incurred a hefty fine, and the hassle of retrieving her vehicle, she wasn't going to let it slide. As she turned her sharp gaze toward the officers, she felt invigorated by the collective presence of those who often seemed untouchable. "Listen," she began, her voice steady but firm. "I parked in front of my friend's house. It's a residential street. This is ridiculous." The officers, appearing amused at first, quickly shifted their expressions to an air of professionalism, straightening their backs in response to her assertiveness. "Ma'am," one officer with a bushy mustache said, "it's against the law to park here without permission. We were simply responding to a complaint." His tone was condescending and set off a firestorm inside Evelyn. "Complaint? From whom?" She shot back, her voice echoing down the quiet street, drawing the gazes of neighbors who had begun to peek from their windows. The curiosity of her fellow residents only heightened her resolve. Before the officer could respond, she stepped forward, the sunlight glimmering on her red blazer as if it were a shield. "No one even bothered to check if it was my vehicle. How many other complaints did you ignore while towing my Jeep? Perhaps the real issue here isn't parking, but neglect." The words lingered in the air like the sudden chill of an approaching storm. The officers exchanged nervous glances, as if they sensed the gravity of a situation spiraling out of control. The sergeant, with a scowl etched across his brow, stepped forward, attempting to take control of the encounter. "Let's not escalate this further, Miss Harper. We're just doing our job." But Evelyn had other plans. She felt a surge of power. Suddenly, there was an audience, and suddenly, her life felt charged with purpose. As her gaze swept over the bystanders, who were now gathering on the sidewalk, she realized there was potential here. This could be more than just a fight over a wrongly towed Jeep. "I refuse to let this injustice go unchallenged," she declared, her voice rising above the murmurs of the crowd. "I will fight for every neighbor who faces the same sort of negligence. This isn't merely about me. This is about all of us." The atmosphere thickened as the realization dawned upon the gathering crowd. What had begun as a simple complaint about a Jeep had morphed into a confrontation, a catalyst for change. Pushed by an invisible force, Evelyn took a deep breath, ready for an even more unpredictable turn of events. The stakes had risen, and she could feel the weight of the world upon her shoulders. As she stood there, defiance in her heart and a crowd behind her, the next chapter of her ordinary life began to unfold, and nothing would ever be ordinary again. As she stood there, defiance in her heart and a crowd behind her, the next chapter of her ordinary life began to unfold, and nothing would ever be ordinary again. The murmurs turned into supportive chatter, and the intent gaze of her neighbors fueled her resolve. Evelyn felt the energy pulse through her. She was no longer just a woman fighting for her Jeep. She had transformed into a voice for the community. The sergeant's hard demeanor faltered as he recognized that the tide was shifting. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Ms. Harper, we can discuss this calmly," he suggested, his tone now laced with caution. But the fear of losing authority added an edge to his voice that did not go unnoticed by the crowd. "I don't want calm. I want accountability," Evelyn shot back, emboldened by the solidarity forming around her. "You represent the law, and we expect you to enforce it fairly. How many other citizens have you overlooked while responding to these so-called complaints? This is about transparency." The crowd grew restless, nodding in agreement. Among the onlookers was Tom, the local newspaper's photographer, who had slipped through the gathering to capture the unfolding drama. The click of his camera snapped her back to the present. Maybe this wasn't just about a Jeep. Perhaps it could become a story that would resonate beyond the walls of Maplewood. "Maybe it's time we shine some light on the lack of communication between the police and the community," Evelyn continued, now gesturing with both hands to illustrate her points. Faces in the crowd brightened. "Perhaps a few articles in the newspaper could create the change we need." The officers shifted uncomfortably. They could sense their authority waning as the crowd echoed her sentiments, chanting phrases like "justice for Evelyn" and "fairness for all." Evelyn's heart raced. Part of her feared where this confrontation would lead, yet another part soared with exhilaration. "Listen," the sergeant attempted once more, but this time his voice was met with a collective scoff from the crowd. It was clear that today was not going to wrap up neatly. "You can't just stir up a frenzy and expect us to bend the rules on the spot. Then let's make it official," Evelyn declared, her words resonating in the air like a battle cry. "Let's address these issues. Let us have a town meeting. I want to speak with the mayor. Set the record straight." Just as the officers were about to respond, a sharp voice interjected from the crowd. It was Carol, Evelyn's friend, stepping out from behind the formation of those who supported her. If they're that worried about a complaint, then they should consider how many complaints have come from the residents about their response times. "I say we take this to City Hall." The crowd erupted into applause, filling the street with an electrifying energy. Evelyn turned to Carol, her eyes alight with gratitude as her friend shared in her determination. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about giving the community back its voice. "Let's rally," Evelyn shouted, raising her fist into the air, and the crowd mirrored her movement. The officers, realizing they had lost the grip on the situation, exchanged anxious glances. The tension in the air was palpable, and it felt like a dam was about to break. Suddenly, a sharp honk pierced the commotion, and a familiar figure emerged from a nearby alleyway. It was Vince, the owner of the local auto shop, who often assisted residents with car troubles. He had parked his truck to investigate the shouting match and approached with a concerned look. "What's the fuss here?" he called out. Evelyn wasted no time. "Vince, I need you to help organize a meeting with the people. Everyone needs to be involved in this. We can't let our voices be drowned out." Vince, though taken aback by the urgency, nodded firmly. "I can help with that. I have a list of people who felt ignored by the police. We can get a town hall meeting going in a matter of days. I know folks who would join." The momentum was building, and the officers could only watch as the situation escalated beyond their control. "You're treading into dangerous territory here," the sergeant warned, but Evelyn's resolve only strengthened. "I am doing what you won't do. Fight for our community," she responded, her voice trembling with fierce conviction. In that moment, she could feel the weight of eyes upon her, a mixture of support, solidarity, and a glint of discovery. Evelyn had stumbled upon something far more significant than the inconvenience of a towed vehicle. She had ignited a movement, one that might change the course of her once quiet town. The realization hung in the air like a charged storm cloud, waiting for the right moment to unleash its power. And there, on that sunny, ordinary day in Maplewood, amid the raised voices and hopes for unity, a new battle for justice was about to begin. A battle that Evelyn had unknowingly prepared for her entire life, and one that would lead to surprising twists she could never have anticipated. And there, on that sunny, Ordinary day in Maplewood. Amid the raised voices and hopes for unity, a new battle for justice was about to begin. A battle that Evelyn had unknowingly prepared for her entire life, and one that would lead to surprising twists she could never have anticipated. The crowd rallied around her, their energy palpable as they began brainstorming how to lastingly affect change. Evelyn could scarcely believe how quickly the situation had escalated. The mundane complaint had ballooned into a movement. Tom, the photographer, snapped away, capturing every passionate expression and fervent gesture. Each click resonated like a beat of a drum, echoing her determination into the hearts of onlookers. As Vince started taking names of residents willing to participate in the meeting, the chatter among neighbors grew louder. Stories began to emerge, a shared frustration about parking rules, complaints of unresponsive officers, and incidents left unresolved. Each personal tale added weight to Evelyn's cause, offering a chorus of voices that strengthened their collective frustration. Every complaint you've had might not seem important to the officers, but don't you think it's time to make our concerns heard? Evelyn proclaimed, her voice ascending above the crowd. We deserve a police force that listens. But among the overwhelming support, a lingering doubt crept into Evelyn's mind. Was she ready for this? She had been a passive observer for so long. Could she truly be the leader everyone needed? Yet, as she scanned the faces gathered, her fear ebbed, replaced with a fierce sense of purpose. It wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs too. The dialogue continued as they brainstormed logistics, but then the atmosphere shifted, almost instinctively. The officers, feeling the heat of the moment, took a step back, regrouping for a plan of their own. The sergeant whispered hurriedly to his fellow officers, concern creasing his brow. There was an underlying tension that suggested the authorities might soon retaliate. Before Evelyn could notice, an officer approached her again, this time more guarded. Miss Harper, we advise you to disperse. This kind of assembly can lead to misunderstandings. You might be putting yourself at risk. His caution felt more like a threat than protection. Risk? What risk? Evelyn countered, heart thrumming in her chest. I am standing here, using my voice for everything our community has suffered in silence. If that's a risk, then maybe it's a risk worth taking. The crowd rallied at her words, echoing her sentiments with claps and cheers. However, a pang of uncertainty nagged at the back of her mind. Could this challenge with the police unlock a deeper layer of issues? With this newfound focus, was she ready for the scrutiny that came with leading? I refuse to back down, she finally stated firmly, locking eyes with the sergeant. We will not be ignored. I'll gather every concern we have, and we're coming to City Hall. Just then, a familiar face came into view through the gathered crowd. Mayor Thompson, a well-respected figure in the community known for her affable nature and commitment to citizen-led dialogues. She approached, eyebrows raised as she took in the impassioned scene before her. What seems to be the trouble here? The mayor asked, her voice calm yet authoritative. Instinctively, the crowd parted to allow her through. Evelyn seized the moment. Mayor Thompson, we have witnessed too many instances of neglect, an unjust towing, police dismissals, and a general lack of accountability. We deserve better than this. Mayor Thompson listened intently, her expression thoughtful as she absorbed the passion and anger swirling around her. I hear you, she acknowledged. It seems there are deeper concerns we need to address as a community. We need to facilitate open dialogue, but it must be conducted with respect. Evelyn nodded, grateful for the mayor's willingness to engage, but there was urgency in her heart. Respect is essential, but so is change. We want now, not tomorrow or next month now. We will gather voices, stories, and the names of those willing to demand necessary reforms. At that moment, the air thickened with anticipation. The sergeant shot her a doubtful glance, but it was too late. Evelyn had ignited a spark that could not be extinguished. Mayor Thompson, sensing the rising tide of public sentiment, nodded slowly. I'll help you organize that meeting, the mayor replied, her voice steady. But you must promise me one thing, Evelyn. When you gather, approach the conversation with open minds. listen to each other and to those in charge. Evelyn realized this was her chance, perhaps the turning point she had never anticipated. I promise, but our voices will ring true. We want to be heard, and to know our concerns will result in action. Just then, from the back of the crowd, an unexpected figure emerged, a local journalist, Penny, known for her investigative reporting. She had been quietly observing the situation unfold and, sensing an opportunity, approached Evelyn with determination etched across her face. "You're onto something big, Evelyn," Penny said, excitement flickering in her eyes. "This is the story of the century. I'll cover the meeting and ensure that the community's concerns reach a wider audience. Together, we can hold them accountable for the change they need to provide." Evelyn's heart swelled, emotions swirling within her. "So, we're all in this together?" she asked, hoping for affirmation. With a nod of agreement from the mayor, several neighbors, and now Penny, she felt the full weight of the movement forming around her. With renewed energy, the crowd began to disperse, animated with hope and inspiration. Evelyn stood still for a moment, watching as people exchanged phone numbers, rooted for each other, and shared their stories. This wasn't just about a wrongly towed Jeep anymore. It was about transforming the very core of their community's relationship with authority. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden hour hue over Maplewood, Evelyn felt a mix of trepidation and boldness. Change was coming, but with it, the challenges would intensify. The path ahead would demand resilience, courage, and the steadfast unity of voices raised for justice. Just as she was readying herself for what lay ahead, an unexpected twist pulled her focus back. Across the street, a man watched the gathering with keen interest, his presence drawing her attention. Clad in a trench coat, he stood leaning against a lamppost, his expression unreadable. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine as their eyes met for a brief moment. There was something oddly familiar about him, a lurking presence that sent waves of foreboding through her. As he turned and melted into the shadows, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were intertwined in ways she had yet to understand. With the stakes higher than ever before, Evelyn understood. This was just the beginning of her fight, and some secrets were waiting just beneath the surface, ready to emerge. With the stakes higher than ever before, Evelyn understood. This was just the beginning of her fight, and some secrets were waiting just beneath the surface, ready to emerge. The weight of that looming revelation pressed on her, but the fervor of the crowd continued to echo in her heart. As they began to scatter, hurriedly making plans for the upcoming town hall meeting, she couldn't shake the visage of the man in the trench coat from her mind. Who was he? The evening air was thick with anticipation, and although she felt a tinge of anxiety, she pushed it aside. Tomorrow would be a day of new beginnings, a day to establish a dialogue between those who enforce the law and those who lived under it. Yet, even with the thrill of her newfound sense of purpose, unease curled within her. Later that night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the dim light fluttering above like a beacon of hope. She scribbled down her thoughts, weaving together the collective stories of her neighbors, drawing connections that illuminated their shared struggles. This wasn't merely an assembly to voice complaints. It was the dawn of a movement aimed at nurturing their community back to health. But her fingers paused, the pencil hovering above the paper as her mind wandered to the mysterious stranger again. She'd never seen him around town before, and that made her uneasy. Was he connected to the police? Or perhaps worse, was there a reason he'd been lurking at the edges of her fight? Suddenly, a sharp knock at her door jolted her back to reality. Heart racing, she peered out the window, half expecting to see an officer. Instead, it was Carol. Evelyn breathed a sigh of relief and opened the door wide. "Hey. Sorry, did I scare you?" Carol asked, stepping inside. The familiar comforts of her home were dispelled by an unsettling haze hanging over her thoughts. "No, not at all. Just lost in thought, I guess." Evelyn smiled faintly as they moved to the kitchen table together, the atmosphere shifting back to one of camaraderie. "After seeing everyone rally together today, I just had to come by and talk strategy," Carol chimed in, determination lighting her eyes. This is huge, Evelyn. We need to prepare for tomorrow. Nodding, Evelyn spread her notes out across the table, her heart swelling with pride. I want to make sure everyone's voices are heard, and we will make sure of it. Carol interjected enthusiastically. But we also need to watch our backs. With all this energy flowing, you know the opposition will try to undermine our momentum. We need allies in the right places. Evelyn nodded in agreement, but as she did, a chill ran down her spine once more. And what about that man? The one in the trench coat? He was watching us today, I'm sure of it. Carol frowned, glancing towards the window. You think he was a cop? I don't know. He didn't look like one, but something about him felt off. Carol leaned in closer. Maybe we should find out who he is then. If he's a threat, we need to know. But right now, we focus on the meeting. We can't let distractions derail us. Changing the subject, they dove into preparations for the town meeting, their voices overlapping in a flurry of excitement. They worked late into the night, envisioning each detail of their presentation, crafting a discussion that would demand attention and respect. Eventually, as the clock struck midnight, Evelyn felt a sense of accomplishment. There was so much hope in what they were doing, but a lingering concern for the mysterious figure still gnawed at her thoughts. The next morning, the sun peeked through her curtains, casting warm beams across her notes sprawled out on the table. Evelyn arose with newfound determination, knowing this was the first significant step toward true change. She dressed quickly, and after a hurried breakfast, made her way to City Hall, the conversations of neighbors swirling in her mind as she walked. Arriving at the entrance, she could feel the palpable energy radiating off the gathered crowd. It was a sea of familiar faces, all eager to demand a reckoning, to share their stories, to seek justice. As she took her place at the forefront alongside Carol and a few others, her heart raced with anticipation. This was not just a meeting, it was a declaration of their unity and intent for change. Just as the gathering began, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd, a member of the police force she'd seen during the confrontation, his stance rigid as he observed everyone from a distance. And behind him, looming in the shadows, was the man in the trench coat. With every instinct telling her to turn around and leave, she stood her ground, staring directly at the stranger. His eyes, dark and piercing, met hers again, as if he held answers to questions she hadn't even asked. The mayor approached the front, silencing the crowd, but Evelyn's focus was split between her purpose and the man's inscrutable expression. Would this meeting liberate their voices? Would it lead her deeper into uncertainty? As the mayor began to speak, Evelyn knew it was time to rise above her fears and embrace the fight ahead. No matter the secrets lurking or the shadows that lingered, she was ready to stand for her community, to illuminate the truths buried beneath indifference. With her heart steadying and resolve firming, Evelyn could feel the beginning of a storm brewing, a tempest that would reshape not just Maplewood, but her own path forever. The chapter of her quiet life was over. This was the start of something undeniable, profound, and irrevocable. The fight for justice had officially begun.